I like Colorado. There, I said it. I just think it has a bad reputation. Not an undeserved one, in fairness, but I was hoping that perception would have been shed by the time Hitman 3 released. Apparently not. However, just because I like the level does not mean I'm blind to its issues, and there are definitely issues. I didn't like the level back in Hitman 2016 either. It was impenetrable, and doing the SASO challenge, while still not as bad as Bangkok in my opinion, was still very frustrating. Since the 2018 release of Hitman 2, Colorado's impenetrability took quite the blow when the developers added stealth grass to the map to make it easier to navigate around the compound. Unfortunately, the one problem area of the map that hasn't been addressed is the perimeter. It's both a fairly small portion of the map, with almost no stealth grass to help with traversal, and it's also the portion that all players will interact with the most. Kind of backwards logic when you think about it. This is why I think the map still leaves a bad taste in people's mouths. Even all these years later, it is still a pain in the backside to get inside the compound. The guards are awkwardly placed, so cover isn't properly effective, and there's barely any cover to make use of when there is something to hide behind. Even weak spots in the fences are not properly signposted, so it's a nightmare learning the outside of the map. So, in aid of this, I'm proud to present my latest modding project. Let's fix Colorado. Actually, this project has been on my mind for 2 and a bit years now. I actually thought of it pre-freelancer. Unfortunately, back in 2022, modding a level, or even editing them in any real way, was convoluted, very annoying, and generally only reserved for the nerdiest of nerds with the strongest of tolerances for slow and painful processes. Back then, a lot of the effort in the modding community for Hitman was that we had to slowly backsolve and reverse engineer the formats IO used in-game. We're still doing that. Saying that as if I'm involved in that sort of thing. Okay, qualifier, other people more intelligent than myself are doing that. However, last month, February 2025, for those watching this in the future, I decided to finally put this project into motion as the tooling for editing levels was now at a point where it was relatively easy for anyone, idiots like myself included, to use. The tooling in this case was comprised of the ZHMod SDK by Orphase, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, and Glacier Kit, which I'll talk about in a moment. The SDK is a wonderful toolbox that acts as a plugin/loader for mods that can interface with the game's more hidden functions, which Glacier Kit and SMF can't touch. Most famously, this also includes a free cam mode. If you want to take pretty pictures, you can do that. However, the SDK does not make changes by itself. It's all temporary and stored in RAM. It can sync to the aforementioned Glacier Kit, which can be used to edit entity files that make up a good majority of a given level's coding, props, and really anything you interact with in the JSON format. And yes, that does mean I now know snippets of both Lua and JSON. Sometimes my life is very weird. I went ahead and started the project, but about 1/3 through completion, I realised the final problem that needed to be solved, and it wasn't an easy one either: pathing and AI routes for NPCs. This was the final blocker for being able to continue with the project, let alone release it. Unfortunately, the file formats that Hitman uses, navp and AIRG files, are binary and haven't been studied so much, and required all that reverse engineering that I was talking about a minute ago. And this was a necessary part of the process, as props that are in the way of routes the AI will take to get to their next animation waypoint will cause them to visibly shake, as if they were stuck in a blender, while traversing land they think is valid to walk on, but now has new blockades that they just phase through. By a happy coincidence, when I started the project, I noticed that Atomic Force, a fellow modder looking into generating new AIRG and navp files for existing and custom maps. Atomic Force had been developing a tool called Navkit for this very purpose. Problem is, Navkit wasn't finished and was also broken. It required having Visual Studio installed to use debug DLLs that could only be found by compiling Navkit from source, and Visual Studio is 11 GB. That's not a satisfactory solution. I gave them a bell on Discord to notify them that Navkit just doesn't work, and they were very happy to oblige, and over the course of several days and testing and improvements of the tool, Atomic Force created a build that had working NavP and AIRG generation for me, and really anyone else to use in their maps and level edits. To give a brief rundown, Navkit works by interfacing with the SDK while the game is running, and then exports out a low LOD version of the entire map that you want to create new pathing for, which can then be saved as an OBJ file. We can then generate NavP data from that, and then that data can be used to generate AIRG data to handle AI waypoints. The final hurdle was getting it to work, and weirdly, custom AIRGs wouldn't work properly unless we gave them a custom hash, for reasons neither me nor Atomic Force could work out. Still, this was actually an easy fix, it just required me to make an entity patch to point to the new custom hash. Pretty simple process despite how complicated I'm making it sound. Okay, enough of how I created it, let's look at the final product, shall we? As you can see, my changes are aimed at providing more cover and making it feel more safe to navigate around the perimeter. For example, I've added what I'm calling safety cover to the two windows near the ATV and these two guards. It's not actually necessary for that cover to exist there, but it makes the route more appealing and approachable for players to take. You'll also notice that the cover is made up of junk found nearby, or just around the map. I haven't actually imported any new props to make the cover. I have duplicated in-level props, such as the hay bales and barrels and wheels and stuff, but nothing new from other levels exists to make cover. The map is filled with junk, so it was kind of unnecessary. Another change I made was to bolster Deceptive cover. The map is half orchard, half junkyard, and cover frequently has holes in it, thanks to fences and objects keeping within the rundown derelict aesthetic of the farmyard. So I added extra props to cover the holes in plausible ways, or just removed it and replaced it with something better. The biggest problem with this map's design is that the location and feel of the map has taken precedence, rather than being tuned to stealth gameplay. It feels like a real place, a really nice real place actually. There's a rustic look about this level that the orange lighting makes so much better in my opinion. But this doesn't hold up well under the scrutiny of players who need to repeatedly play this level. Kind of the point of the game series. This design philosophy is why the player has to deal with a lot of waiting around, feeling uncomfortable going from each situation, something that later maps, even maps that should be harder, such as Santa Fortuna, don't suffer from, despite having similarly hostile areas. But those maps have proper stealth grass, and they are designed with stealth in mind, and with decent cover I might add. I also took the liberty of adding new items the player can pick up across the map, the most notable being the addition of gardening tools and I think one hammer, as well as bananas, because frankly, it's a little weird that a fruit farm doesn't have any of these potassium boomerangs hanging around. There's 4 bananas on the map, but I'll let you find them. I've also added a single car battery in the vehicle's garage, as the map has a bunch of puddles in places that have almost no use to the player unless you bring in an electrocution device via your inventory. I did consider adding 2, But again, specifically because of how many puddles there are on the map, actually explosives as well, I decided that it might be best to just stick to one. Bring in more devices if you're feeling cheesy. I also made the map a little bit more sniper assassin friendly. There's an extra gas canister I put outside the barn that should be a little bit more accessible via the water tower. You're welcome. And that's it. There's a larger list of changes on the main mod page on Nexus Mods. I really hope that these changes make it more approachable for players to take on the map. I didn't want to change the core identity of the level, I just wanted to make the most played parts easier to take on and easy to grab disguises in a level that's not exactly inviting to players. Maybe one day these changes can be officially added, one can dream, right? Then again, IO have bigger problems right now. Problems they are more than happy to ignore. And with that, I thank you very much for watching. Goodbye. No, but seriously, delist the Sapienza pack. This is absurd now.